Ma'am, step away from the motorcycle right now unless you want this night to get a whole lot worse. The words cracked through the humid Texas air like a warning siren, sharp enough to make every driver slowing along Interstate 45 turn their heads. Red and blue lights pulsed across the wet pavement beneath the overpass, reflecting off chrome, rainwater, and the sleek black body of the Ducati Panigale parked on the shoulder like a predator forced to kneel. Naomi Carter slowly removed her gloved hands from the handlebars. She didn't argue, didn't raise her voice, didn't even flinch when Officer Ryan Keller stepped closer with one hand resting near his holster and suspicion already burning behind his eyes. Traffic rolled past at 60 miles an hour, tires hissing through rainwater, headlights streaking silver across the night. Somewhere above the freeway, thunder groaned low and distant. Naomi lifted her visor carefully, revealing calm dark eyes and rain-soaked curls pressed lightly against the sides of her face. "Officer," she said evenly, "I reached for my signal too late. That's all." Ryan let out a humorless laugh. "Funny thing about people riding bikes like this," he replied, circling slowly around the Ducati. "It's never just that." The younger officer beside him, Daniel Ruiz, shifted uncomfortably near the patrol SUV. He couldn't have been older than 26, fresh-faced beneath the glow of the dashboard lights. "Sir," Daniel said quietly, "dispatch only flagged speeding." Ryan ignored him completely. His flashlight beams swept over Naomi's leather jacket, the black helmet resting against the tank, the expensive bike, the small tattoo visible near her wrist. His jaw tightened more with every detail. "License," he demanded. Naomi reached slowly toward her jacket pocket. Ryan immediately raised his voice. "Easy, nice and slow." A few drivers had already stopped farther down the shoulder. Cell phone cameras lifted into the rainy darkness one by one. Naomi noticed them immediately. She also noticed the black SUV parked half a mile behind traffic with its lights off. Still there, still waiting. Her pulse slowed instead of rising. That was the strange thing. About pressure. Most people cracked under it. Naomi became quieter, more focused, more dangerous. She handed Ryan her license without another word. The officer glanced at it briefly. "Detroit," he muttered. "Figures." Daniel frowned slightly at the comment, but stayed silent. Rain tapped softly against the hood of the patrol car. Naomi kept her eyes on Ryan. "Officer Keller," she said calmly after reading his badge, "I need you to listen carefully." Ryan looked up slowly, irritated already by her tone. "You in a position to give instructions now?" "No," Naomi answered. "I'm trying to prevent you from creating a situation bigger than a traffic stop." The sentence hung in the air between them. Ryan stared at her for a long moment before chuckling under his breath. "There it is," he said, glancing toward Daniel. "Every single time." Naomi said nothing. A semi-truck thundered past, rattling the shoulder hard enough to shake the flashing lights across the concrete barrier. Ryan stepped closer until the rain dripping from the brim of his cap nearly touched her visor. "You know what I see?" he asked. "I see somebody doing over 95 on a Superbike at 1 in the morning, acting like she owns the road, then talking like she's above the law." Naomi's voice stayed level. "And I see an officer making assumptions before asking the right questions." Daniel looked away instantly. Ryan's expression hardened. Around them, phones continued recording. One livestream viewer count climbed past 20,000. Comments flooded the screen faster than the camera holder could read them. Black biker pulled over. "Dude, this is crazy. Why's he talking to her like that?" Naomi noticed every single lens pointed at her. She'd spent years learning how quickly moments like this spread online. One misunderstanding, one bad judgment, one officer too angry to slow down. "Step away from the bike," Ryan ordered suddenly. Naomi obeyed immediately, boots splashing lightly onto the soaked asphalt. She removed her gloves carefully and placed them on the seat. The younger officer shifted again. "Sir," Daniel said lower this time, "maybe we should just run her information first." Ryan didn't even look at him. "Ma'am," he said sharply, eyes locked onto Naomi. "Is there anything on this motorcycle I need to know about?" For the first time all night, Naomi hesitated. Not from fear. Calculation. Somewhere behind those dark windows half a mile away, people were watching, waiting, timing everything. Her next words came slow and precise. "Yes," she said quietly. "And if you escalate this stop before verifying who I am, you could compromise a federal operation." The rain kept falling. Traffic kept moving. But for one strange second beneath the overpass, the entire highway felt dead silent. Officer Ryan Keller stared at Naomi for several long seconds after she mentioned a federal operation, then shook his head slowly like he had already decided exactly what kind of person she was. "That is cute," he said, rain dripping from the edge of his jawline. "Real cute." The younger officer glanced uneasily between them while dispatch crackled softly through the shoulder radio, clipped to his vest. Naomi stood still beside the Ducati, black leather darkened by rain, her breathing controlled, and even despite the growing tension tightening the air beneath the overpass. The flashing patrol lights painted blue across her cheekbones one second, red the next. She had been in dangerous situations before. Drug houses in Atlanta, financial raids in Chicago, undercover meetings where one wrong sentence could end everything. But moments like this always felt strangely familiar in a different way. Slower, colder, less predictable. Ryan stepped around the motorcycle again, flashlight beams sweeping over the carbon fiber frame and custom exhaust system. "You know how much this thing costs?" he asked without looking at her. Naomi answered calmly. "Enough that I worked hard for it." Ryan smirked at that. "Uh-huh." Daniel shifted near the patrol SUV again. "Sir, dispatch is still running her information." "Good," Ryan replied. "Because I want every detail." Naomi watched him carefully now. There was something underneath the aggression. Fatigue, maybe. Or bitterness buried so deep it had started leaking into every interaction he had. The kind of officer who no longer saw individuals. Only patterns. Threats. Assumptions. A gust of humid wind pushed rain sideways beneath the bridge. Water rolled down Naomi's jacket collar, cold against her skin, but she barely noticed. Her attention stayed fixed on the black SUV sitting motionless down the highway. Still parked. Still watching. The operation should have ended an hour ago. Instead, she was standing on wet concrete with 3 cameras pointed at her face, while a federal witness remained exposed somewhere across Houston. Ryan suddenly stopped walking and pointed his flashlight directly toward her. "Tell me something," he said. "Why would somebody involved in a federal operation be riding alone without backup at 1 in the morning?" Naomi answered immediately. "Because undercover agents do not usually advertise themselves with a convoy." Daniel lowered his head slightly, almost hiding a reaction. Ryan noticed. "You buying this?" he asked sharply. Daniel hesitated. "I just think maybe we should verify before escalating." "Escalating?" Ryan repeated with a short laugh. "You think asking questions is escalating?" Naomi could feel the younger officer becoming more uncomfortable by the minute. His eyes kept moving toward the live streamers gathering behind the barrier. More people had stopped now. Someone whispered loudly enough to carry through the rain. "They pulled over the wrong woman." Another voice answered. "Nah man, cops do not stop people like this for nothing." Naomi had heard versions of both opinions her entire life. Judgment always came fast. Facts arrived later, if they arrived at all. Ryan handed her license back without warmth. "Step over to the front of the patrol vehicle." Naomi obeyed quietly. Her boots splashed through shallow puddles reflecting the spinning emergency lights. Daniel opened the rear passenger door instinctively, then paused as Ryan approached Naomi again. "Hands behind your back," Ryan ordered. Daniel looked up immediately. "Sir." Ryan kept his eyes on Naomi. Standard procedure. Naomi's expression barely changed, but inside, calculation accelerated. Every extra minute mattered now. Every delay increased the chance that the people connected to that SUV would realize something had gone wrong. She lowered her voice carefully. "Officer Keller," she said, "listen to me closely. There are people monitoring this stop right now who are far more dangerous than I am." Ryan stepped closer instead of backing away. "There it is again," he muttered. "The attitude." Naomi slowly placed her hands behind her back without resistance. Metal cuffs clicked shut around her wrists a second later, tighter than necessary. Daniel looked visibly uncomfortable now. "Sir, dispatch still has not confirmed anything." "Exactly," Ryan replied. "And until they do, she stays detained." Naomi closed her eyes briefly as rainwater slid across her forehead. Somewhere behind the concrete barriers, thunder rolled low across the Texas sky. The livestream cameras kept recording. The black SUV remained parked in darkness. And half a mile away, hidden behind tinted windows, someone lifted a phone and quietly said 4 words. "She has been stopped." The handcuffs were cold against Naomi's wrists, but it was not the discomfort bothering her. It was the clock. Every second that passed beneath the overpass tightened something invisible around the operation she had spent 8 months building. Rainwater dripped steadily from the edge of her chin as she sat on the front bumper of the patrol SUV, shoulders straight despite the metal restraints behind her back. Officer Ryan Keller stood several feet away speaking into his radio, while red and blue light washed over the concrete pillars surrounding them. Daniel Ruiz remained near the driver's side door, quieter now, watching both Naomi and his partner with growing uncertainty. The livestream crowd had doubled. A woman under a clear umbrella whispered into her phone camera. She has not even resisted once. Another man zoomed in on Naomi's face like he was trying to capture guilt hidden somewhere in her expression. But there was none. Only control. Naomi lowered her eyes briefly toward the wet asphalt beneath her boots. Her reflection shimmered across the puddles in broken flashes of police light. She remembered another night years ago in Detroit. Another pair of flashing lights. Another officer assuming her older brother matched the description of someone else because he was young, black, and driving a car too expensive for the neighborhood they lived in. Her brother had survived that stop physically, but afterward, something inside him changed. He stopped trusting uniforms. Stopped believing calmness guaranteed safety. Naomi had never forgotten the look in his eyes afterward. Not fear. Exhaustion. The kind that settled deep in a person after realizing they would always need to prove innocence before being offered dignity. Thunder rolled again above the interstate. Ryan finally lowered the radio from his mouth and exhaled sharply. Nothing yet, he muttered. Daniel frowned. Dispatch delay at this hour is normal. Ryan glanced toward Naomi. Or maybe she fed us a story. Naomi lifted her head calmly. If I wanted to lie, Officer Keller, I would have picked something less traceable than federal credentials. Ryan walked toward her slowly. You know what your problem is? He asked. You think sounding educated changes how suspicious this looks. Naomi met his stare directly. And you think suspicion is evidence. For a brief second, neither of them moved. Rain hammered harder against the overpass now, loud enough to blur the traffic sounds beyond the shoulder. Daniel looked between them uneasily, tension visible in the tightness of his jaw. Ryan crouched slightly in front of Naomi. Let me tell you what I see, he said quietly. I see somebody riding nearly 100 miles per hour through Houston at 1 a.m. on a bike connected to 3 unsolved robbery cases involving motorcycle crews. Naomi blinked once. This motorcycle is registered under my legal name and federal clearance. If that is true, Ryan replied, then dispatch will confirm it. Naomi's eyes shifted briefly toward the dark SUV still sitting half a mile down the highway, barely visible now through the rain, but still there, watching, waiting. Her stomach tightened for the first time all night, not from fear for herself, for the witness. Somewhere across Houston, a 14-year-old girl sat hidden inside a motel room under federal surveillance waiting for extraction at dawn. The hard drive hidden inside Naomi's Ducati contained transaction records, faces, routes, and payment logs connected to a trafficking network spread across 3 states. If the people in that SUV realized Naomi had been detained long enough, they would know the transfer had failed. And desperate people erased loose ends fast. Naomi leaned slightly forward despite the cuffs. Officer Keller, she said lower now, I need you to understand something. This stop stopped being about speeding the moment those cameras came out. Ryan followed her gaze toward the live streamers. Public accountability bother you? No, Naomi answered. But public attention changes criminal behavior. Someone is monitoring this right now. Daniel looked toward the highway immediately. Ryan remained unconvinced, but something flickered behind his eyes for the first time. Doubt. Tiny. Brief. Then his radio suddenly crackled loud enough to cut through the storm. Dispatch. Unit 7, come back. We have partial verification on the detained individual. Ryan grabbed the radio instantly. Go ahead. Static hissed through the speaker. Naomi remained perfectly still. Even the people filming nearby quieted instinctively. Then dispatch spoke again, slower this time. The name Naomi Carter is returning multiple federal access restrictions. Stand by for agency confirmation. Ryan's expression changed almost imperceptibly. Not apology. Not yet. But the certainty inside him had finally begun to crack. Rain pounded harder against the concrete overhead as the dispatcher's voice faded into static, leaving a strange silence behind that even the traffic noise could not fully cover. Officer Ryan Keller stood frozen for half a second with the radio still pressed near his shoulder. The certainty that had carried him through the stop was no longer sitting as comfortably on his face. Daniel noticed it immediately. "Sir," he said carefully, "federal restrictions usually mean—" "I know what they mean," Ryan snapped, though his voice carried less force now. Naomi remained seated against the front bumper of the patrol SUV, wrists restrained behind her back, dark eyes steady beneath the spinning emergency lights. She had learned years ago that people revealed themselves most clearly during the exact moment confidence started slipping away from them. Ryan looked at her differently now. Not respectfully. Not yet. But cautiously. The livestream crowd sensed the shift too. Conversations softened. Cell phones tilted closer. Someone whispered, "Wait, she was telling the truth?" Another voice answered, "Then why is she still cuffed?" Naomi exhaled slowly through her nose and lifted her gaze toward the black SUV down the interstate again. Still parked. Still silent. But now the driver's side headlights flickered once before going dark again. A signal. Her stomach tightened. They were getting nervous. Ryan followed her line of sight this time. "What is so important about that vehicle?" he asked suddenly. Naomi answered without hesitation. "Because they are watching how long you keep me here." Daniel turned sharply toward the highway. "You think they are connected?" "I know they are," Naomi replied quietly. Rainwater rolled from the ends of her curls onto the collar of her jacket. "And if they decide this stop compromised the transfer, someone innocent pays for it." Ryan rubbed one hand across his jaw, frustration battling with uncertainty inside his expression. He hated losing control of situations. Naomi could see it clearly now. Men like Ryan built identities around certainty, around believing they could read danger before it unfolded. The problem was that certainty often turned into blindness when mixed with pride. Dispatch crackled again. "Unit 7, Federal Liaison requested direct confirmation." "Stand by." Daniel immediately looked relieved. Ryan did not. His eyes narrowed slightly, as if the growing evidence somehow irritated him more than reassured him. Naomi spoke before he could say anything else. "Officer Keller, remove the cuffs." Ryan looked at her sharply. "Not happening yet. Every second matters. And every suspect says that." Naomi's expression hardened for the first time all night. Not anger. Disappointment. "You still think this is about ego," she said softly. "That is your mistake." Ryan opened his mouth to answer when headlights suddenly appeared from the far end of the highway access road. Fast. Too fast. A black sedan merged onto the shoulder nearly 200 yards away before slowing abruptly. Daniel instinctively stepped closer to the patrol SUV. "Sir." Ryan's posture tightened instantly. The livestream crowd backed away slightly from the barrier. Naomi stared at the sedan without blinking. "That is not federal," she said. The black vehicle remained idling in darkness for several long seconds. Rain blurred its windows. No plates visible from this distance. Then slowly, the passenger side door cracked open. Ryan's hand moved toward his holster instinctively. Daniel raised his flashlight. Naomi stood up immediately despite the cuffs. "Do not escalate," she warned. "You hear me? Do not escalate." But Ryan was already moving forward across the wet pavement, voice sharp against the storm. "Stay in the vehicle." The figure inside paused. Traffic hissed past beside them in long silver streaks, while thunder rolled overhead again. Then the passenger door closed. The sedan pulled away suddenly, tires spraying rainwater as it disappeared down the interstate. Daniel let out a breath he did not realize he had been holding. Ryan stared after the vehicle with his jaw locked tight. Naomi lowered her eyes briefly. Too late. Whoever had been inside that sedan now knew everything they needed to know. The operation was compromised. Ryan turned back toward her. "Who were they?" Naomi answered quietly. "People who now know I failed to arrive on time." The weight of those words settled heavily beneath the overpass. Even Ryan felt it now. Not the full picture, but enough to realize this stop had become something far larger than speeding tickets and assumptions. Then suddenly a new sound cut through the storm. Engines. Multiple. Deep and fast. Everyone turned toward the highway entrance at once as three dark SUVs tore through the rain toward the scene with government strobes flashing behind the windshield. The three dark SUVs sliced through the rain like moving shadows. Engines low and powerful, as they swerved onto the shoulder beneath the overpass. Their hidden government strobes flashed white through the storm, reflecting across the soaked concrete walls and the puddles gathered near the patrol vehicles. Every livestream camera turned instantly toward the arriving convoy. Officer Daniel Ruiz stepped backward instinctively, while Ryan Keller squared his shoulders, confusion hardening across his face again as adrenaline rushed back into the scene. The first SUV stopped hard enough to spray water across the pavement. Before the engine even settled, four figures stepped out wearing dark tactical jackets marked with small gold lettering near the chest. Federal Bureau of Investigation. The entire atmosphere beneath the overpass changed in a single breath. Traffic still roared beyond the barrier. Rain still hammered the bridge overhead. But suddenly nobody moved casually anymore. One of the agents, a tall woman with silver streaks near her temples, walked directly toward Naomi without looking at Ryan first. Her expression was sharp enough to cut through steel. "Agent Carter," she said immediately, eyes scanning the cuffs behind Naomi's back. "Status." Naomi answered calmly despite the rain dripping from her face. "Transfer compromised approximately 12 minutes ago. Black sedan confirmed visual contact before extraction." The woman's jaw tightened. "Damn it." Ryan stepped forward at once. "Hold on," he said. Nobody identified themselves before rushing into an active stop. The female agent finally turned toward him slowly. Her stare was ice cold. "Special Agent in charge Vanessa Monroe," she replied. "Who authorized detaining my agent?" The question landed harder than shouting would have. Ryan opened his mouth briefly, then glanced toward Naomi as if trying to rebuild control over a situation already slipping away from him. "She was speeding," he answered, "and acting suspicious." Naomi lowered her eyes for 1 second at those words. Suspicious. The same word had followed people who looked like her entire life. Too quiet became suspicious. Too successful became suspicious. Too calm during pressure somehow became suspicious too. Vanessa Monroe looked at the cuffs again. "You detained an undercover federal operative during an active trafficking investigation over speeding?" Ryan's voice hardened defensively. "I did not." "No, she was federal." "She told you," Naomi said quietly. Silence hit again. Daniel looked down immediately. The live stream crowd reacted in murmurs spreading through the rain like static electricity. Phones zoomed closer. Comments exploded across every live feed. She really was federal. They cuffed an FBI agent. Naomi remained completely still through all of it. No anger. No victory. Only exhaustion pressing behind her eyes now. Vanessa stepped closer and unlocked the cuffs herself. Metal clicked softly as Naomi rubbed circulation back into her wrists. Red pressure marks remained against her skin beneath the rainwater. Ryan noticed them immediately. Something about seeing those marks unsettled him more than the federal jackets or the flashing credentials. Because now the stop no longer looked like procedure in his own mind. It looked personal. Naomi flexed her hands once before speaking. "Did we lose the witness?" Vanessa hesitated. That hesitation answered enough already. Naomi closed her eyes briefly. "Talk to me." Vanessa lowered her voice. The motel extraction team arrived 6 minutes late. Room was empty. Rain drummed harder overhead. Naomi's shoulders sank almost invisibly. Ryan watched the change in her expression carefully now. Not fear for herself. Grief. Real grief. "The girl?" Naomi asked softly. Vanessa answered carefully. Unknown at the moment. For the first time all night, Ryan's confidence fully cracked. He looked between the agents, the soaked federal vehicles, the live stream cameras, and Naomi standing silently beneath the storm. His assumptions had not simply embarrassed someone. They may have destroyed an operation protecting a child. Daniel spoke quietly beside him. "Sir," Ryan ignored him. His eyes stayed fixed on Naomi now. "You were telling the truth the whole time." Naomi looked at him calmly. "I tried to." The words carried no arrogance, no bitterness. Somehow that made them worse. One of the federal agents opened the Ducati storage compartment carefully while another began speaking urgently into a secure radio about relocation points and surveillance failures. Vanessa turned sharply toward Naomi again. "We need to move now." Naomi nodded once, but stopped before entering the SUV. Slowly, she looked back toward Ryan Keller standing alone beneath the flashing patrol lights. Rainwater streamed from the brim of his cap, while the live-stream cameras captured every second of his silence. "Officer," Naomi said quietly, Next time you stop someone, look at the person before the stereotype. Ryan could not answer. Not because he was angry anymore. Because deep down, standing beneath the cold Texas rain with thousands of strangers watching him unravel in real time, he realized she was right. The rain finally began to soften as the federal convoy pulled away from the overpass, leaving behind fading reflections of red, blue, and white lights trembling across the wet highway. Traffic slowly returned to normal. Live streamers drifted back toward their cars, still talking in stunned voices, while clips from the stop spread across social media faster than anyone standing there could fully understand. But Officer Ryan Keller remained motionless beside his patrol SUV long after the federal vehicles disappeared into the Houston night. Water dripped steadily from the brim of his cap onto the pavement below. Daniel Ruiz stood several feet away, uncertain whether to speak or leave him alone. The younger officer had never seen his partner look like this before. Ryan was usually loud during stops. Certain, fast to judge, fast to move. But now he stared at the empty stretch of highway where Naomi's Ducati had vanished behind the convoy escorts. And for the first time in years, silence felt heavier than authority. Daniel finally broke it carefully. "Sir, you did not know." Ryan let out a dry laugh beneath his breath. "That is the problem," he said quietly. Daniel frowned slightly. Ryan rubbed one tired hand across his face before continuing. "I thought I knew exactly who she was the second I saw her." Rain tapped softly against the hood of the patrol vehicle. Somewhere farther down the interstate, thunder rolled away into the distance like the storm itself was finally leaving the city behind. Daniel glanced toward the livestream crowd dispersing near the barrier. People online are already posting the videos. He muttered. Ryan looked toward the phones still glowing in strangers' hands. Thousands of views. Maybe millions by morning. His own body camera had captured every word. Every assumption. Every moment Naomi Carter remained calm while he escalated. But strangely, the public embarrassment was not what bothered him most. It was her face during the final moments before she left. Not angry. Not hateful. Just disappointed. That look stayed with him harder than shouting ever could have. He leaned against the patrol SUV slowly, exhaustion finally sinking through his posture. "You know what gets me?" Ryan asked quietly. Daniel waited. "She never once tried to humiliate me back." The younger officer lowered his eyes. Ryan stared out across the dark highway again. Most people would have. Daniel thought carefully before answering. Maybe she understood something we did not. Ryan did not reply immediately. His radio crackled softly with routine dispatch chatter from other parts of the city. Traffic stops. Disabled vehicles. Noise complaints. The ordinary rhythm of a long overnight shift. But none of it sounded ordinary anymore. Not after tonight. Ryan suddenly remembered the exact moment Naomi first removed her helmet. Rain on her face. Calm eyes. Steady voice. He had already decided what kind of threat she represented before she even spoke. The realization sat like concrete in his chest now. Not because he considered himself racist. He had spent years telling himself he treated everyone the same. But somewhere along the line, caution had quietly transformed into assumption. An assumption had turned into instinct. Dangerous instinct. Daniel spoke softly again. "You think the girl is okay?" Ryan's jaw tightened immediately. The missing witness. 14 years old. Hidden in a motel room waiting for extraction while he argued beside a motorcycle under an overpass. He swallowed hard. "I do not know," he admitted. "But if something happened because I could not slow down long enough to listen," his voice faded away unfinished. The rain became lighter still, almost gentle now. Water streamed slowly along the gutters near the shoulder while the city lights reflected gold. Across the slick asphalt, Daniel watched his partner carefully. "What are you going to do?" Ryan looked down at his own hands for several long seconds before answering. Hands trained for authority. Hands trained for control. But tonight they had placed cuffs on the wrong person for the wrong reasons. "First," he said quietly, "I am going to watch the body cam again from the beginning." Daniel looked surprised. Ryan continued staring at the pavement. "Because somewhere in those first 30 seconds, I stopped seeing a human being and started seeing a stereotype." The younger officer said nothing after that. There was nothing to argue with. Above them, the storm clouds slowly drifted east over Houston while traffic hummed through the wet darkness below. And standing beneath fading police lights with rainwater soaking through his uniform, Officer Ryan Keller finally understood that sometimes the most dangerous mistake a person can make is believing they already know someone before hearing a single word they have to say. By sunrise, the video had spread across the country. Every major platform carried clips from the traffic stop beneath the Houston overpass. Some videos showed Naomi Carter standing calmly in the rain while handcuffed beside her motorcycle. Others focused on Officer Ryan Keller's words, replayed again and again beneath headlines about racial profiling, law enforcement bias, and the dangers of assumption. News channels slowed down the footage frame by frame. Comment sections exploded with anger, debate, and judgment from millions of strangers who had never stood beneath that storm but suddenly believed they understood everything about it. Inside the Houston Federal Building, Naomi sat alone near the observation windows overlooking downtown traffic while pale morning light spread across the glass towers outside. She had changed into dry clothes hours earlier, but exhaustion still clung to her shoulders like extra weight. A paper cup of untouched coffee sat cooling beside a thick stack of case files. Across the room, agents moved quickly between offices speaking in low, urgent voices about relocation routes, surveillance footage, and financial transfers. Connected to the trafficking network. The operation was damaged, but not dead. Naomi stared quietly at a city just beginning to wake up. Somewhere out there, a frightened 14-year-old girl was still missing. That mattered more to her than internet outrage or television headlines. The door behind her opened softly. Vanessa Monroe stepped inside, carrying a tablet under one arm. "We found her," she said immediately. Naomi turned so fast the chair legs scraped lightly across the floor. "Alive?" Vanessa nodded once. "A bus station outside Galveston. Local transit officers spotted her after we circulated surveillance stills." Naomi closed her eyes briefly as relief finally loosened something tight inside her chest. She lowered her head into her hands for one quiet moment before exhaling slowly. Vanessa studied her carefully. "You okay?" Naomi gave a tired smile, without humor. "I will be now." Outside the window, morning sunlight finally broke through the fading storm clouds over Houston. The city below shimmered gold against wet streets and glass buildings. Vanessa stepped closer and placed the tablet on the desk beside Naomi. "You should probably see this too." Naomi looked down. The screen displayed body camera footage from Ryan Keller's patrol unit already circulating across national media outlets. One paused frame showed Naomi seated in cuffs beneath the flashing highway lights, while rainwater streaked down her face. Another captured Ryan staring silently after learning her identity. Naomi looked away after only a few seconds. "I am not interested in destroying him," she said quietly. Vanessa folded her arms. "Public affairs is already involved. Internal review too." Naomi nodded faintly. "That is their process." "And yours?" Vanessa asked carefully. Naomi remained silent for a moment before answering. "Mine is making sure that girl gets home safely." Across town, Ryan Keller sat alone inside a small review office at precinct headquarters with the body camera footage paused on a monitor in front of him. The room smelled faintly of burnt coffee and old paperwork. He had watched the stop 6 times already without speaking. Each replay seemed worse than the last. Not because of the cameras, not because of the headlines, but because he could now hear things he missed in real time. Naomi warning him calmly. Daniel hesitating, his own voice growing sharper every time she remained composed instead of defensive. The footage exposed something uncomfortable he had spent years avoiding about himself. Bias did not always look loud or obvious. Sometimes it looked like certainty. Sometimes it sounded like instinct. A soft knock came at the open office door. Daniel stepped inside holding 2 coffees. "Thought you might need this." Ryan accepted the cup quietly. "Thanks." Daniel leaned against the doorway awkwardly. They found the witness. Ryan looked up immediately. "Alive?" "Yeah." Relief crossed Ryan's face so quickly it almost hurt to watch. He lowered his head afterward, staring at the steam rising from the coffee cup between his hands. "I almost became the reason they did not." Daniel stayed silent. Ryan rubbed one hand slowly across his jaw. "You know what scares me most?" he asked quietly. "I really believed I was being a good cop." The younger officer did not answer right away. Finally, he said, "Maybe good cops are supposed to question themselves sometimes." Ryan looked back toward the paused frame on the monitor. Naomi standing in the rain. Calm, dignified, human. The exact things he failed to see clearly when it mattered most. Sunlight crept slowly through the blinds across the office floor, while the city outside continued moving forward into another ordinary day. But for Ryan Keller, nothing about the world looked quite as ordinary anymore. 3 days later, the rain was gone from Houston, replaced by sharp autumn sunlight and cool wind moving through the city streets. Outside the downtown federal courthouse, reporters crowded behind metal barricades waiting for updates on the trafficking investigation that had quietly become national news. Black SUVs lined the curb while cameras flashed every time an attorney or federal agent stepped through the revolving doors. Naomi Carter exited the building slowly with a folder tucked beneath one arm, sunglasses shielding the exhaustion still sitting behind her eyes. The operation had finally stabilized overnight. 4 arrests, 2 recovered victims, financial records secured. It was not perfect, but it was enough to keep the network from disappearing completely. As Naomi descended the courthouse steps, she noticed someone standing near the edge of the sidewalk away from the reporters. Officer Ryan Keller. No patrol lights, no uniform jacket, just a plain navy button-down shirt and tired eyes that looked older than they had beneath the overpass. Naomi paused when she saw him. Ryan removed his hands from his pockets slowly, uncertain suddenly in a way she doubted he had felt often in life. The city noise moved around them in waves. Car horns, camera shutters, distant sirens somewhere farther downtown. But for a moment, neither of them spoke. Ryan finally broke the silence first. I almost did not come. Naomi studied him calmly. But you did. He nodded once. The wind shifted through the plaza, tugging lightly against the sleeves of his shirt. I heard they recovered the girl, he said quietly. Naomi answered with a small nod. She is safe. Relief crossed Ryan's face again, deeper this time. Real. Human. Good, he murmured. That matters. Naomi adjusted the folder beneath her arm and waited. Ryan glanced briefly toward the reporters before lowering his voice. Internal affairs suspended me pending review. Naomi did not react visibly. Ryan gave a faint, humorless smile. Honestly, I deserved that. The honesty surprised even him once the words left his mouth. Naomi watched him carefully now. The defensiveness from the highway was gone. So was the certainty. In its place stood a man finally forced to confront himself without excuses protecting him anymore. Ryan swallowed once before continuing. I watched the footage over and over. He looked down briefly at the sidewalk between them. You warned me multiple times. You stayed calm. You gave me chances to slow down. Naomi remained quiet. But I had already decided who you were before you even spoke. The confession landed heavier than any apology could have. Around them, reporters continued shouting questions at courthouse officials while sunlight reflected off the glass towers. Surrounding downtown Houston, Naomi finally spoke softly. Most people do not realize they are doing it. Ryan looked back up at her. That does not make it harmless. Naomi held his gaze for several seconds. Then she nodded once. No, it does not. Another silence settled between them, but this one felt different from the storm beneath the overpass. Less hostile, more honest. Ryan exhaled slowly. I wanted to tell you I am sorry. Naomi's expression softened slightly, though the sadness inside it remained. I know. Ryan looked surprised. You do? Naomi nodded faintly. People who are not sorry usually spend all their energy defending themselves. The words struck him harder than anger would have. He rubbed one hand against the back of his neck, sunlight catching the exhaustion written across his face. I keep thinking about something you said that night, he admitted quietly. About seeing the person before the stereotype. Naomi lowered her sunglasses slightly, meeting his eyes fully for the first time since the traffic stop. That was not really about me, she said. Ryan frowned slightly. Naomi glanced toward the busy street beyond the courthouse steps where strangers crossed intersections carrying coffee cups, backpacks, briefcases, ordinary lives. One day, she said softly, you are going to stop somebody else. Somebody scared. Somebody angry. Somebody who does not look like you. The wind moved gently through the plaza again. And in the first 5 seconds, Naomi continued, you will decide whether they feel seen or judged. Ryan stood completely still listening. Naomi stepped down one more stair toward the sidewalk. That choice matters more than people realize. Ryan nodded slowly, eyes lowering again. I understand that now. Naomi studied him for one final moment before extending her hand. Ryan looked startled briefly before shaking it carefully. Her grip was steady, warm, human, not triumphant, not cruel, just dignified. "Take care of yourself, Officer Keller," she said quietly. Then Naomi released his hand, turned toward the waiting black SUV at the curb, and walked away beneath the bright Texas sunlight, while Ryan remained standing silently on the courthouse steps, watching the woman he once reduced to a stereotype disappear into the moving heart of the city. 2 months later, winter sunlight spilled softly across the streets of Houston, turning the glass buildings downtown pale gold beneath a cold December sky. The storm from that night on Interstate 45 had long passed, but pieces of it still lived quietly inside the people who stood beneath that overpass. At the Houston Police Academy Training Center, a classroom filled with rookie officers sat unusually silent while body camera footage played across a projector screen at the front of the room. Nobody touched their phones. Nobody whispered. The only sound was the low hum of the heating vents and the rain from the old footage echoing faintly through the speakers. On screen, Naomi Carter stood beside the Ducati beneath flashing highway lights, calm despite the handcuffs around her wrists. The footage paused just before she spoke the words that had eventually spread across millions of screens across the country. "Look at the person before the stereotype." At the back of the classroom, Officer Ryan Keller stood quietly beside the wall with his hands folded in front of him. He was no longer wearing the same confidence he carried that night. In some ways, he looked smaller now, more human. The training instructor muted the projector and faced the room. "This stop is now being used nationally in procedural bias training," she said carefully. "Not because someone was evil, but because assumptions made too quickly can change lives faster than force ever will." The room remained silent. Several recruits glanced toward Ryan, standing in the back. None of them expected him to be there in person. Ryan kept his eyes on the paused image of Naomi on the projector screen. Rain on her face, calm in her posture, dignity even while misunderstood. The instructor nodded toward him gently. "Officer Keller volunteered to speak today." Ryan hesitated for one brief second before stepping forward. The polished academy floor reflected the projector light across his shoes as he moved toward the front of the room. He looked at the recruits carefully, seeing younger versions of himself in their posture. Certain, confident, believing instinct alone always protected good judgment. Ryan finally spoke quietly. "I spent 15 years thinking experience automatically made me objective." Nobody interrupted. That night, I stopped listening before the conversation even started. He glanced back toward the frozen frame behind him. "I thought I was reading danger. What I was really reading was my own assumptions." Several recruits lowered their eyes thoughtfully. Ryan continued. "The hardest part afterward was realizing the woman I handcuffed treated me with more patience than I gave her." The room stayed completely still. Outside the academy windows, cold wind moved through the bare trees lining the parking lot, while afternoon sunlight stretched long shadows across the pavement. Ryan looked at the paused frame one last time before stepping away from the projector. "If you wear this badge long enough," he said softly, "you will meet people who challenge every instinct you trust. Slow down anyway. Listen anyway. Because authority without humility becomes dangerous faster than you think." When the session finally ended, the recruits filed out quietly in small groups, speaking softer than they had before entering the room. Ryan remained alone beside the projector for a few extra moments after everyone left. The image of Naomi still glowed against the white screen in front of him. Calm eyes, rainwater, flashing lights, human dignity under pressure. He reached forward and shut the projector off gently. Across the city, Naomi Carter sat on a black Ducati parked near Buffalo Bayou Park overlooking the Houston skyline as evening settled across the water. The air carried the sharp, clean chill of winter now instead of storm humidity. Her helmet rested beside her on the concrete ledge while distant traffic hummed softly through the city below. She had just finished another operation briefing. Another long week. Another case waiting somewhere beyond the horizon. Her phone buzzed once beside her glove. A news article notification appeared briefly on the screen. Houston Police Academy introduces new bias awareness training following nationally viewed traffic. Stop. Naomi read the headline quietly before locking the phone again without opening the article. The skyline reflected across the dark river in trembling ribbons of silver and gold. Somewhere nearby, laughter drifted from people walking along the park trails wrapped in winter coats. Ordinary life continuing forward the way it always does. Naomi placed her helmet back on slowly and looked out across the city one final moment before starting the motorcycle. The engine rumbled low beneath her like distant thunder. Warm headlights stretched across the pavement ahead while cold evening wind moved gently through the trees beside the water. Then Naomi pulled onto the empty road and disappeared into the glowing Houston night, leaving behind nothing except the fading sound of the engine and the quiet reminder that kindness, dignity, and self-control will always speak louder than prejudice ever can.